That day was December the 1st, 1997. I was 15 years old and a sophomore in high school. My school was the smallest of three schools in our county, and so really the school that I went to, Heath High School, it was out of the three. My parents said was the one that that was supposed to be the safest. It was just a country school, and there was only about 600 kids that went there. I knew every single person in the school, and if I didn't really know them personally, I knew at least knew their name. And so that morning was a Monday after Thanksgiving break, and I remember being off of school for 5 days and being a teenager. I'm a night person, not a morning person. So it was hard to get up. I remember my dad coming in and singing the most annoying song to wake us up in the morning. And me and my twin sister put ourselves together as fast as we could. And I remember exactly what I was wearing that day. I was wearing a pair of Adidas pants, some Adidas shoes that had blue stripes on it. I had a black Adidas shirt with blue stripes, so it kind of all matched. And I threw my hair up in a ponytail. And and this is one of the things that I really regret and wish I would have done differently, and try to remind myself of this all the time. Instead of stopping and taking the time out to hug my parents and to tell them how much I love them, I didn't do. I just yelled at them. I just yelled bye and then ran out of the door. And I never knew that that day was going to change my life forever. That was a day that I could have not have come home. That would have been the last time that my parents would have possibly seen me. But I also would ride to school with my best friend's older sister. She was a senior, and my best friend was a freshman, and she lived in my neighborhood. And so I knew that if I didn't hurry and get out into the car, then her sister was going to leave us. And then that would leave me having to ride the bus, which I was over. I was ready to get my license because me and my twin sister were turning 16 on Christmas Eve that month. So I was looking forward to that and excited about that. But I knew that I had to hurry up and get in that car. And so we got in the car and we drove to school and got there on time. Every morning, my sophomore year, me and my sister would attend a prayer circle that met in the lobby of our high school. And it was volunteer. It was right before the bell rang for the 5-minute bell to get to class before you're late. And so it was before school started. And there's probably about 30 kids that would meet, and we would always give prayer requests. And then somebody would yell time to pray, and we'd get in the circle. We would do prayer requests and then pray and then say amen. And then that was it. It was a very short thing, but it was kind of a way for me to kind of lay out like all the stress that I kind of had. And I wasn't always one to, add to the request of prayers, but, mentally I was able to, share in all the stresses that I had as a high school student. And that morning, I think I had a world civ test. And so I really needed prayers for that because I wasn't good at it. But anyway, nothing seemed out of the ordinary that morning when I was in prayer circle. And there was always other students, like groups of students outside of the prayer circle. So other people being around wasn't abnormal. And the office was across the hall from the prayer circle in the lobby. And then the front door, there were lots of kids coming in from being dropped off as a car rider. So there, besides the prayer circle, there were other students around. But somebody yelled time to pray, and we got into the circle. I don't even remember what we prayed about, but I know that after we said amen, I had just enough time to walk to the middle of the lobby on the way to get my backpack and then to my first class World Civ. But before I could get there, the first thing I saw was a 14-year-old girl get shot in the head. And the person that did this was also 14. He pulled out the 22 out of his backpack and started shooting at us. And like I said, I saw the girl get shot, and I knew her. Her name was Nicole. But I never saw him with the gun. And so at that point, after seeing her, I remember just kind of standing there and looking at her and trying, I guess when you go into shock, you try to make sense of what you're looking at. And so I then started telling myself, this is a joke. This isn't real. She's going to get up and she's going to be fine. And I remembered hearing the gunshots, and I was not familiar then, like the sound of guns and what it sounded like. It definitely didn't sound like guns on television, but it sounded like firecrackers. So that also made more sense to me that this was a joke. And so I remember hearing 3 slow pops. So the first shot hit Nicole. And then after that, it was a spray of bullets, and I was hitting the spray. And the feeling of being shot, I guess for me, was the best way I could describe it was almost kind of like fainting in a way. It was like my entire body went numb. There was a ringing in my ears. And then as I fell down to the floor, I felt like I was floating, and the impact of hitting the floor didn't even hurt. I landed on the ground. And then as soon as I landed on the ground, my twin sister, who saw the first girl get shot, she also saw the boy with the gun. So she knew what was happening. And she also felt a bullet go through her hair. But she was on her way to me whenever she felt the bullet go through her hair. So I always think of how the fact that if I wasn't there, if I would have made the decision to do something else, what could have happened to my sister. But she got down on the ground and she covered me while he was still shooting. And then when he finally stopped, that's when I started questioning her as to what was going on, because I didn't know why I was on the ground. I didn't know. The only thing I knew was that I couldn't feel my stomach, but I never noticed my legs. And I think, again, it was shock. But she finally told me that there was a gun. And then she told me who did it. And I knew him. He was a freshman. He was in band with me. He was somebody that I liked to be around. He was like a class clown, and I enjoyed being around him. And he was the last person that I would have ever thought that would have done something like this. But when she told me that there was a gun, I knew I'd been shot. And I shared with her about not being able to feel my stomach. And we both didn't know what that meant, but I felt okay at that time. Like, I didn't feel sick. I didn't feel like anything was wrong. My sister couldn't find a bullet wound because my shirt was black and we couldn't find blood. And I think I was also bleeding probably a lot internally. We looked over to our right and we saw our best friend Kelly holding her left shoulder and crying. She'd been grazed on the left shoulder, and it had made a pretty big wound because she was bleeding everywhere. And so my twin sister looked at me and she said, "Be strong, don't die. I'll be back to check on you." And so she went to check on our friend, and then both of them came and talked to me. But I don't even remember what we talked about. But at some point, my twin sister left the lobby, and she went and at that point, there was no such thing as lockdown drills that kids do now for school shootings. We didn't have a resource officer at the school. None of those things existed. So there was zero plan as to what to do. So they were eventually sending all the kids to the gym that was attached outside of the school. And so my sister headed that direction and saw our friend that we rode to school with that morning. And she actually went into the lobby of the gym, and there was a payphone, which is ancient and hard to find and very rare now. But it was around the time where cell phones existed, but we didn't carry them like kids do today, or all of us do. It was back in 97, we didn't have one. And so my sister was able to call my parents on the payphone and tell them exactly what had happened, and that when she left me that I was talking. So she was able to give them at least peace of mind as to that I was talking and that I was conscious and that maybe I was going to be okay. There were 2 hospitals in Paducah, so they didn't have any idea which one I would end up being at. So they just had to choose a hospital. And my aunt and my grandmother and my uncle went to the other hospital to sit and wait for me. But while that was happening with my family, I was still laying on the floor in the lobby, wondering what was going to happen to me. I remember my algebra teacher that I had that year, and I was terrible at math. So I was surprised that she was the teacher sitting beside me, but she started to pray for me. And that was the first time that I started getting scared and thinking about the fact that I could possibly die. And so then I looked at my teacher and I said, "Am I going to die?" And she said, "No, you're not going to die. You're going to be fine." And then I said, "Well, I'm paralyzed because I can't feel my stomach. And at that point, I realized I couldn't move my legs. I said, I'm paralyzed. I know I am. And she said, no, you're just in shock. You'll be fine. And I think that she knew that I knew exactly what was happening to me, but she was doing her best to try to keep me from, going into shock and to keep me calm. But after talking with my teacher about my injury and the fact that, that I was scared, I then started to get really tired and I wanted to close my eyes. And she kept telling me, don't close your eyes, keep them open, don't close them. And I remember that I got to a point where I couldn't fight it anymore. I was so tired. And so I closed them. And when I closed them, the next thing I remember was almost like I woke up from a bad dream. I didn't really remember everything about it. I knew that something had happened that was a bad dream, but it was I kind of knew a little bit about it, but it's I didn't focus so much on it. I was just oh, that was a bad dream. That was terrible. But that what I was experiencing at that moment was what was real, and that was not real. What had just happened, the bad dream, the shooting. And after that, I remember, I don't even really remember this setting. It was I remember that I was sitting with people or walking with people and talking to them. I felt comfortable with the people I was with. I talked a lot to the person that was on my right, and I don't know who the person was, but I felt comfortable with them and I could talk to them. It was I knew them and the other people that was with us. I don't remember what we talked about. There was a conversation, but I don't even remember the conversation. But I remember being happy. I remember understanding what was going on at that moment or what we were doing. We were just walking all together. And I remember even the person, there was somebody on a bike that rode beside me, and I had to scoot over and I knocked into the person beside me on my right, and we laughed about it. But I don't know what we talked about. I don't know if it was male or female. I don't remember anything. But then all of a sudden it was just everything went black. And then as if I had faded, the ceiling came back into focus, and I was staring at the ceiling, and I was back in the lobby, and I was just this really happened. And I'm looking around, but once I was back in that situation, I had a different perspective or a different feeling. I wasn't scared anymore. I had this sense of that I knew I was going to be fine, that I was going to be alive, and that everything was going to be okay. I remember while we waiting for the ambulances, because that's basically where what we did until, they arrived. I remember looking to my right, and I was watching this girl that I knew. She was 17 years old. She was a senior, and she was, at that point, my teacher that was with me before, she was with that student, and my chemistry teacher was with her as well. And I remember seeing this girl rolling all over the ground, and she was moaning because she'd been shot. And then I remember hearing my teacher say over and over again, she's not going to make it. She's not going to make it. And I watched this whole scene until the ambulances came to get us. And I didn't realize that I was actually watching this girl die, because she died in surgery 2 hours later. And then when they put me in an ambulance, they put me in the ambulance with somebody they were giving CPR to. And I didn't know who the person was, but I do know, as I was in the ambulance, I remember just feeling calm still, like everything was going to be okay. And the paramedic that was trying to give me an IV, and he was all over the ambulance. And the first thing I was like, you're not going to stick me with the IV. And you're can't even stand up straight. And I said, why don't we wait till we get to the hospital and you help them over here with CPR, help this person. And the paramedic was just like, okay. And then he went and helped the person that was getting CPR. I didn't know who that person was, but I later found out it was my friend Casey, who was shot in the head and killed. When I got to the emergency room, I remember still feeling calm and that everything was going to be okay. And when they gave me 2 IVs. One was giving me blood. I ended up having 2 pints of blood, and the other IV was giving me fluids. I had to have a chest tube put into the side in my side, and then and after that, then they also started performing tests on me. They would take a needle and poke me or ask me to move my feet, and I couldn't feel the pokes and I couldn't move my feet. But at that moment, they then told me, as far as they knew, I was paralyzed. And you would think that a normal person would actually believe that, or would be upset or think my life's over and would be devastated, because I knew what being paralyzed was, that there wasn't a cure, that this was something that I was going to have to live with for the rest of my life. But I still had that sense of calm, and I felt like everything was going to be okay. But I also knew this was something that I should be crying over. So I thought I looked crazy for being okay or looking okay. So I tried to make myself cry. And then I looked stupid and silly because I was a bad actress. And so I just stopped crying. I just kind of went with it. And when we got into, well, and I remember even comforting my family whenever they came in to tell me, or to talk to me and to see me. And I remember my grandmother coming in and crying, and I was like, Grandma, it's okay. I'm going to be fine. I'm going to be okay. After I saw my family, they then took me to the x-ray to find out what happened with the bullet. And I think that's when, after hearing about my injury, that's when I realized how blessed I was to still be alive. I learned, because I didn't know much about 22s whatsoever, but I learned that 22s, when you're shot with one, they bounce around inside your body. But the bullet entered my left shoulder. There's like a little purple dot. You can't even see from where you're at, but there's a little tiny purple dot. It's almost even hard for me to find sometimes. It's like right here. The bullet entered through there. It completely missed my heart, because your heart is right there. Bounced around inside my body, missing every major artery and organ besides hitting my lung. And after hitting my lung, it hit my spinal cord. And so I was paralyzed. I'm paralyzed from the mid chest down, which is called a T4, T5 injury. The fourth and fifth thoracic vertebrae of my spinal cord is damaged. And the bullet then exited my back, but didn't even go through the back of my shirt. And for me, I felt it was just crazy. For that bullet was all over my body, missed every major artery and organ that could kill me, and then wouldn't even go through the back of my shirt. So I didn't have to have surgery to have it removed. No surgery was needed. And I was realizing that it missed my heart. And at that point, I was happy to be alive. I had found out that 3 girls died, ages 14, 16, and 17. I knew all of them. And the 3, and I was still alive. So I felt like, even though I couldn't walk, the fact that, being paralyzed was nothing compared to not having my life for the rest of my life. And so I kind of continued to surprise myself on how I was able to handle the situation as time went on. I struggled in the beginning a lot of times. I guess whenever I was trying to learn how to use the wheelchair, or starting after I got over my injury to my lung, and I started trying to learn how to sit up again and dress myself. Those things were really hard. And at 16 years old, it was very frustrating. And I remember the last victim that was shot. That person left on December the 16th, and I was the only person left in the hospital. And I just wanted to go home. And I knew that it was going to be a long time before I went home. So I had a moment of wanting to give up, that I just wanted to lay in bed for the rest of my life, that it was going to be too hard. I was 16 and I should be a teenager, hanging out with friends and going out on dates and things like that. And being excited about getting my license like I was. And I knew that that was going to be something that was going to have to be delayed even further at that point. But I always felt like I guess I call them God sightings in a way, that there was always something that was sent to encourage me and remind me that everything was going to be okay. And so whenever I started having those feelings of like, I'm going to quit, that's when I started receiving letters from people all over the world. The most I received in one day was 600 letters and 45 packages. My mom would sit beside my bed, and whether I was awake or whether I wanted to hear them or not, she read each letter to me. And she opened up so many with her letter opener that she even tried to butter her bread at lunch with it. And she's like, what am I doing? Like, but she sat and read them to me. And eventually I started listening to them. And I started thinking that there were so many people that didn't know me that were taking the time out to write me and to tell me that they cared and that they were thinking of me, that I no longer felt alone at that point. And I felt like, if these people that don't even know me aren't giving up on me, why am I giving up on myself? So then I continued pushing myself till I was able to start using the wheelchair and started learning how to live my life in a wheelchair, and I wasn't giving up. And so it seemed like there was always encouragement as time went on. Like whenever I got ready to go back to school, I became concerned and worried about how people would treat me because I was in a wheelchair. Like, what could I do? What kind of things? I was in choir, and so I knew we did a music and dance production, and I thought, if I was still going to be a part of that, can I dance in a wheelchair? I was in band, so I thought, how am I going to be able to march when we do competitions? I played soccer, and I knew that wasn't going to be an option, but there were things that were changing in my life, and I didn't. And I was the only person that was in a wheelchair in my school at this point, and everyone that I knew me walking. I was scared of how I would be treated. But I was then invited to a camp. It was in Alabama, where I learned how to water ski, jet ski, ride a horse, climb a tree. I would have to say that I was realizing at that point that I had done more in a wheelchair than I'd ever done walking. And so then that was encouraging to me. It told me that I didn't need to give up on myself, that I was capable of doing things. I'd have to do them differently, but I was still capable of doing anything I wanted to do. And I felt like no one judged me. I felt like my classmates were very encouraging and helpful, and especially my friends and my sister. I had a lot of support through those people. So I had people that were always there for me. And then my senior year, right before my senior year, whenever I'm supposed to walk across the stage to get my diploma, I was then asked to go to a hospital in Los Angeles where a doctor had developed a brace that would allow me to walk. And it wasn't going to be a cure, but it would give me the chance to walk across the stage for graduation. And it came just in time for me to graduate. And so I went to Los Angeles the first semester of my senior year, which I had no problem doing at that age. It was awesome. But I learned how to walk in my brace, and I used it in March of 2000 to walk a quarter of a mile in the Los Angeles Marathon. And then I used it to walk across the stage for graduation. I also used it during my senior prom to stand up and dance. I could actually look my date in the face. My junior year, I had my date in my lap and he was in the floor and I didn't know what to do with him. So I actually, I felt like that was another gift that was given to me to remind me that, you're still going to get to live your life. And I had to look for those things. I also then had the ability to speak. There were things about me that changed because I was a very shy person. I would have never put myself out there to, be in the spotlight or to share a message or to talk like I am now nonstop. I never would have done that. And there were things about me that I was learning that I never thought I had before. And so I really felt like I was given a purpose at that point. And I really think that during my NDE, I really think that even though I didn't remember who the people were, I think that they were friends or family. They were people that I was close to, maybe even God, maybe Jesus. I don't know, but I was comfortable with that person. But I know at this point that the conversation they were having with me was that person telling me it wasn't my time and that I had to go back and that I was going to be okay and to not be afraid because I that's the only thing I can think of that we could have talked about, and I seemed happy and then I was okay. And so I kind of feel like whenever it's our time, that it's almost going to be like, I guess, like, it's almost going to be like we're going to go to sleep and it's like waking up from a bad dream, that what we're experiencing right now is not real, that this is really the dream. This is the part that's not real. And that one day we'll wake up and that is what will be real. And that's kind of what I felt. And I remember all through my life being scared of dying, being scared of death. And I remember at 4 and 5 years old, constantly thinking about the fact that my parents were older and that they were going to die at a young age, or me as a young age, because I was the youngest of 6 siblings. My brother's 22 years older than me. So he's the oldest sibling. And so at that point, my parents were 40 and 45. And I knew that I wasn't going to get to spend the time with them like my other siblings. And so I guess I focused and was constantly worried about them passing away. And then I guess the thought of death and me dying too. And I felt like I learned that day that it's nothing to fear, but that this is the bad dream that we're living, and we'll wake up to what is real. And that is going to be not a bad dream. It's going to be a lot more positive and loving and happy, like I was feeling with the people that I was with whenever we wake up. So to me, my near-death experience was something that kind of gave me that sense of there's nothing to be scared of. And I always have to kind of remind myself of that there's nothing to be scared of, that I can continue living my life, that I could do this, because one day I'll wake up and I won't have to deal with this anymore. So, and look for those sightings or those messages that I'm receiving from, I guess, the other side that says, keep on going. You're going to be okay. Just keep on going because you're still fulfilling your purpose. You're doing what you're supposed to do. Because I did question, why am I still here? And there were 3 other girls that died, because even one of the girls, the girl that was laying down beside me that I mentioned, she was shot the exact same place I was. I don't think she was paralyzed, but she was shot through the left shoulder, but it ended up hitting an artery and she bled to death. I always question kind of like, why am I still here? And it doesn't make sense to me. Why was I chosen to still be here? And then she's gone. But I think that survivor's guilt, that feeling of that questioning why, is what motivates me to not take what I have of life that's left and just waste it away, to not focus on negative. I try to choose to be happy and look at those positives. I try to go through all the frustrations and, like the why me's and the frustrating things. I have to go through those, but then I have to remind myself, I have a family, I have children. I was able to live my life, and those 3 girls weren't. And for that, and I was given this purpose that I need to fulfill, and it would be like doing them a disservice to give up on myself, if that makes sense, and to not do what I felt like the purpose I was given to finish in this dream or whatever, this life or whatever, that to make the best of this bad dream that I was living.